My name is Peter Stevens. I am the inventor of a thing called the Personal Agility System. I've been in and around the Agile community for quite a while, and it's my honor to come to the Ukraine over and over again to talk about agility and leadership. And today I'd like to start with a very simple idea, to ask a question. Who is in the room? Okay, and so here you'll see that Mentimeter code. There's also a QR code that you can scan. I've got a couple of fun questions at the beginning. Okay, kind of what you do, where you're from, that sort of stuff. And then what I'd like to do is take a deeper look. What is your role in the company? And I'm kind of distinguishing between doers, that is the people who do the work of the company, and any kind of facilitator, manager, or leader. Although there are some roles like technical management, which is kind of on the border between these two things. And then take a look at the vital signs of your organization. I've actually come to the conclusion that a lot of the problems that we have are due to the challenges of effective leadership. And I've got some hypotheses about how we can measure that. Okay, and that's what the poll is about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you, maybe about 5 minutes to go fill out the poll while I give you some introductions. When I get through the introductions, we'll come back and see what data we've gotten. So what I want to talk about is agility for executives. I just finished the book on personal agility. It's going to be showing up on Amazon in the next couple days, maybe a couple weeks at the most. And one of my favorite quotes came from a hotel director in Sri Lanka. And she said, agility is for executives, and we have the data to prove it. And that was her story was actually part of the book, Naomi Hundinetti in Colombo. And I actually think that we got to take this a step forward. Well, yes, agility is for executives, but leadership skills are for everybody. Okay, and so what I want to do today is connect leadership with agility and agility with leadership. I'd like to start out with a story. This was one of my clients. This is also a case study in the book. And Walter touched on a really essential problem, which I think every organization is confronted with. Okay, and we look at getting things done. And I just saw a talk from the World Agility Forum from the CEO of Roche Pharmaceuticals, huge company, over 50,000 people. They said, we can't get anything done. It is so difficult to get things done in this company. How can we make it possible to get things done again? Now, Walter's company is much smaller than Roche, but they already had the same problems. They wanted to change. They wanted to get something done in the organization, and they literally were not able to. So let's kind of look at how this played out. Talk to me. There we are. So we start. This is now about 4 years ago. Walter's company, FutureWorks, was part of a larger consulting company. The partners decided they had different ideas about how to move forward, so they moved in different directions. They split the company into several smaller companies, and FutureWorks was one of the companies to emerge out of this fission, I call it, the pieces coming apart. Walter was thinking in terms of, someday I'm going to retire. I want to pass the torch, but I want to pass on a company that is capable of sustaining itself. Okay, so he set a number of goals, how to do this. Together with his leadership team, they dedicated 10% of the capacity of the top leadership. Now, this is a company with 30 people. This is a company where the leaders of the company are still expected to do work for the customers. So, one full-time equivalent out of 30 people is a huge commitment for an organization like this. They defined their initiatives and they went to work. Now, what happened? Well, it just felt like they were crawling. They started working on something, and then they got halfway into it. They discovered the problem wasn't what they thought it was, and they had to kind of go back and restart. And 2 years later, where were they on their initiatives? Well, basically, they hadn't achieved any of them at all. And this kind of gave Walter a pause, and he says, okay, well, what are we going to do? Somewhere along the line, he'd heard about agility, and through some mutual connections, we had a conversation with each other. This time we did it with agility. Okay, we'll talk a little bit later about what that means exactly, but the situation was basically the same. Once again, they dedicated 10% of the capacity of their organization, of their top leadership. Only this time they worked in iterations. They used agility, they used cadence, they set goals that they thought they could achieve in a couple of weeks. 6 months went by, and notice how quickly that went by. So whoosh, yep. And then they discovered they'd achieved all the goals that they'd set out to achieve. Okay, and Walter was quite a happy man at this point because some of those goals included things like profitability and employee turnover and why are people here and how do we get them to stay and why do our customers want to work with us. And so basically he had a viable organization. And in fact, he's now even happier because it's 2 years since then, and he's actually just completed a management buyout. And so he's looking at, kind of leaning back and putting his feet up on the desk and just kind of watching the ship sail happily off into the sunset. Okay, so as I say, so what happened? They accomplished everything they needed to achieve their initial goals. Half of the goals they set, or half of the ideas that they'd come up with, they discovered they didn't need to do. Okay, now some of you might be familiar with Jeff Sutherland, twice the work in half the time. The proportions are correct, but it's the wrong focus. It's really about all the goals with half the work in a quarter of the time. Okay, and as I say, the impact in the finances were immediate and obvious. Okay, so we hear a lot of people saying, well, agility this, agility that, don't do this and don't do that, and say, guys, I'm excited about agility. Agility is good for you. It's good for wherever you are. Okay, and what I'd like to do today is share why that's good for you, why I'm excited about it, and why you might be excited about it too. And I think first and foremost, agility means hope. I've been teaching people Scrum and other Agile frameworks for about 15 years now. And every once in a while, I get an email or a message like this one. I've kind of edited out the personal stuff, but basically, thanks to agility, I've had this real positive impact in my life for my work. I am grateful. Okay, there's that genuine saying thank you. Now, why does agility mean hope? Well, agility is about the search for a better way. Now, when we talk about agility, we talk about all kinds of things. And sometimes we talk about Agile with a capital A and get lost in the practices of Scrum and Kanban and SAFe and whatever they're called. But agility is really about this first sentence in the Agile Manifesto. Uncovering better ways, let's just skip the software part for a moment, of doing what we do by doing it and helping others to do it. Okay, we'll take a little bit more of a look at it later, but you can see when we're looking for new ways of working, when we're trying to deal with the VUCA world, when we're going through our digital transformation, all of these are about going places we haven't been before. So it's not about implementing a known solution, it's about figuring out what the problems are and identifying solutions and being able to implement that. And for this sort of stuff, agility is fantastic. Okay, now this is what my book has been about. I'm really excited because the book is actually crawling its way onto the App Store at Amazon. You can already pre-order the Kindle version, and we're getting the print version up online as we speak. And my hope is that we'll have general availability by the 1st of December. So this is actually moving. One other thing that I'm excited about that I'd like to share with you, I created a video to kind of explain Scrum and explain the mindset that Scrum is trying to implement, okay? And I think you'll find it's a lot of fun. If you like Henry Knieberg's video about product ownership, you'll like this one too. bit.ly/inside Scrum. And oh, by the way, I'm going to publish this on my LinkedIn profile right after we get offline. So you'll be able to find these links. So what are we going to talk about? Well, I want to talk to you about leaders who are already being agile, share their challenges from their point of view. I want to take a closer look at agility and kind of how it connects to the world of an executive leader. And we'll take a look at some of the problems. And in particular, we'll look at one solution. I don't have enough time to solve all of the problems in the world. So, let's take a look at the first problem. So let's have a look at the challenges that executives are facing today. So here's my first secret for you. Okay, I did say this was 3 secrets of agile executives. So the first secret, listen before you talk, ask before you tell. Okay, and when you ask clarifying questions. Okay, and it turns out that being in a position of knowledge, being able to give direction, to see context, to see the big picture, it's all about seeing the big picture. And the way you get there is by asking questions. And it turns out when you follow this approach, something very interesting happens. You build empathy. Empathy is a prerequisite for trust. And it's also a prerequisite for alignment. And alignment is a prerequisite for any good thing you want to do in the company, like make a decision or hold focus on a priority until that priority has been implemented. So let's talk about that world that our executives are trying to deal with. The first is it's an uncertain world. Okay, when we at the personal agility system, we have this metaphor of navigation. Imagine you're a small wooden boat on a big ocean. Okay, and the ocean is well, let's just say the waves are big compared to the boat. Okay, and when you're navigating across the ocean, well, how did you do that before there was GPS? Well, you needed to look at the stars and look at the sun and measure the position. And well, if you're caught in a storm, you don't have time to do that. So big ocean, small boat. How do we handle this? We've been dealing with the pandemic. We got the one crisis behind us. I don't need to tell anyone in Ukraine about the problems of conflict moving forward. For the first time in 80 years, we have a major conflict in Europe, and this conflict is spilling out in all kinds of unanticipated ways to the rest of the world. Be that with the availability of energy or food or hacker attacks or whatever. So there's a huge amount of stuff that we could be worried about right now. And could actually become a problem. And while we're doing all this, oh, hey, wait a minute, we got customers. We still need to sell things to our customers. We still need to make things for our customers. We still need to innovate. Never before has it been easier for a customer to jump ship. If there's somebody who's more innovative or more cost competitive than we are, well, all of a sudden the customer can go. So we have to be innovative and we have to be, stay close to our customers. So what does this mean for an executive? Well, when I talk to executives, what I hear are the following concerns. Okay, first is we got to keep the lights on. We have to keep we have to do the business of running the business, and that's true, kind of regardless of what else is going on in the world. Because of all of the things that are happening, we need to be more resilient and more responsive to change. We need to stay relevant to our customers. Okay, so the problem is with all of this change, it's entirely possible that a small startup is going to reinvent our business model, and all of a sudden we have a huge problem getting business. And finally, attractiveness. This is kind of the flip side of the coin. Being innovative is the key to staying relevant to your customers, but being able to innovate and create new things is the key to attracting, new talent and high talent. Okay, so these are, if we have a company that's going to be moving very slowly and is unable to innovate, we become unattractive both to our customers and to our future staff. Okay, now these are all complex problems. What is a complex problem? Well, complex problem is when the answer isn't obvious. And in fact, you're not even sure if you're asking the right question, if you're solving the right problem. But there are consequences if you get it wrong. And so this is the environment that an executive is working in, especially at the top leadership level. Now, when I look at these challenges, especially the challenge of getting things done, what I see are basically 4 root causes. Okay, the first is a lack of a clear purpose. Okay, second question is, do we have a good purpose? Do we have the right purpose? Do we have a compelling purpose? But sometimes it's not even clear what the purpose is. Okay, which means getting alignment is hard. Now, without the alignment, we've got all kinds of things that we have to do. So everybody's trying to do everything at once, and we end up with a severe multitasking problem. Now, all of these things make it difficult for us to take a decision, and they make it difficult to hold that decision long enough to see it to completion. So what this means is the symptom of all of these problems is an inability to get things done. Okay, and this is a problem that we see happening from organizations of all sizes around the world. So let's see how our vital signs are doing. I'm going to switch the screen share for a moment. So this first question, I kind of asked this one for fun. I have another version of this talk called The Mathematics of Leadership. And I thought, oh my God, what if people are scared of math? So I thought I'd say, well, let's see how we're doing with math. But this was basically a fun question. Talk to me. Yes. Okay. So who is in the room? So we're talking about team managers and multi-team managers. Okay, this is good. I don't quite understand how this slide works. It's supposed to show me, where all the pins are, and there are no pins coming up. So I got to figure that one out. So I don't really know where anyone is coming from. This is kind of an interesting one when we talk about, kind of how many direct reports do I have? And we see we've got quite a range here. Okay, some people have got a lot of people working for them. This is what's called span of control. Okay, and this is the ratio of how much management to operational you have. Okay, and we see we've got a couple of variation. One person has got quite a lot of people under them. Okay, very interesting. Now let's get to what I call the vital signs. How effectively can I work? Okay, so notice this first one is about purpose, which is actually looking not too bad. Alignment, multitasking. So it looks like we got a bit of a multitasking problem here. We have a real problem making decisions, and we won't even talk about getting things done. Now, when unfortunately, I can't do this directly from Menti. They don't know what a net promoter score is. But, if we say, the 9s and 10s are saying, my company is doing a good job at this. The 7s and 8s are saying, my company is doing an okay job, nothing to complain about. And anything below that is a detractor. Say, my company has got serious issues here. So what I'm going to do is let's go back to the presentation, and I'll share the data with you when I did this at another conference where we got a somewhat higher response rate. So let's go back over to the presentation. Okay, and so here we had there were about 200 people in the room, about 70 of them answered. 10% of them were what I call doers. The rest were various levels of management. Somewhat happier with their vital signs. So they were looking a bit healthier from this perspective. But when you convert that into a net promoter score, what you see is, well, actually, we could be doing a much better job with leadership. Okay, now agility is trying to help us with all of these things. Okay, and I believe that the place to start is with us as individuals. We become more agile, and that enables us to create companies and organizations that are more agile. So let's talk about what does it mean to be agile, and how can we apply that to our work as an executive. Now, my second point is, we saw at the beginning, executives are saying, well, what does this have to do with me? Actually, it has quite a lot to do with you. Okay, and let's have a look at why. Now, having said that, this is kind of a delicate topic because we're going to be challenging here, or maybe calling into question some very basic assumptions about what's the best way to lead people and what's the role of a leader in an organization. So I'm just going to say, careful. We could have some inconvenient truths coming ahead. People have talked me into keeping the adult language out of it, so this will be good, but still manager discretion advised. Okay, so when I talk to executives about agility, the first question is, well, what do they ask? Okay, and agility wasn't created by managers, it wasn't created by leaders, it wasn't created by the academics or the consulting companies that most leaders pay attention to. So the first question is, what is all of this stuff about? Okay, and then once they get past it and they say, oh wait, yeah, this is something real. Well, then we get to the real substantive questions like, how can we innovate faster? How do we get our people talking to each other? How do we break down the silos, better products, et cetera? But then ultimately, it then goes back to the question of, well, what does this mean for me? Okay, and that's, what does it mean for me in the sense of, how do I make this a success? But also, what does this mean for my career? And, one of the problems is, as Agilists, we haven't had a good answer to that last question. Okay, oh, it means you're going to lose influence and you're going to step out of the way and let other people do the work. And most executives, if I were an executive, I would say, well, wait a minute, that's not what I have in mind. Okay, and anyone who's talking about psychological safety will know that if the change that we're proposing is not going to be good for the people who we're proposing it to, there's no way that they're going to be in favor of it. So, what does agility offer for executives? And I actually think the answer is quite a lot. Okay, so but let's get to that when we get there. So the first thing is, it's not just hype. Okay, and we see lots of examples I had the honor of participating in an initiative that came from Capgemini, one of the world's largest consulting companies, and the World Commerce and Contracting Association. This is the worldwide organization helping, procurement and vendors come together and collaborate more effectively, to collaborate, to have responsive collaboration across company borders. And we wrote a document called the Agile Contract Manifesto, which was to say, okay, contracts set thing in stone, but the world's not set in stone. So how can we better match contracts with the needs of the modern world? Now, agility has been on the radar screen, at least since the Harvard Business Review published an article on it back in 2016. This was, I believe, Bain was the consulting company that kind of drove that publication. And you'll notice the Wall Street Journal picked up on that a couple of years later, 2019. Notice how they put kind of the management spin on it. Are you agile enough for agile management? Note the fear, okay? And this is already the impedance mismatch between agility, which is about creating safe spaces, and management, which command and control, which is also about fear, okay? Because how do you keep people doing what they're supposed to do? Well, fear of the consequences. Now, the other thing is agility really works, and you can get real results even in big projects. All of the top companies today, the ones that are making headlines, the ones that are at the top, top of the stock market valuation charts, they may or may not be doing name brand agile, but in how they work and how they think and how they tick, they're all very agile. One of the most visible projects has been SpaceX Starship development program, where they literally went from a water tank to a suborbital prototype in about 18 months, producing a new prototype roughly once a month. Okay, so we see these patterns of iteration. They work very well for rocket ships. We won't even talk about their competition because it's almost embarrassing. More traditional companies have also been able to get real results. Okay, here we see Bosch. Bosch is a major supplier to the automobile industry. Among other things that they make are the little things that go beep, 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 beep when you're backing up, the park distance control. They said, hey, what if we made a park distance control for locomotives? And they were able to go from an idea to a prototype to a version of the product that they could sell in just 5 weeks. I'd like you to let that sit in for a moment. Can your company even agree to have a meeting to discuss the possibility in 5 weeks? Okay, and this is, they're very clearly operating on a different time frame here. One thing that really struck me is about the time I heard about this example, a few weeks later, Bosch put out a advertisement on LinkedIn explaining how they had created a new automated medical test device that could test automatically for COVID in just 7 weeks. Okay, so this idea of going from idea to prototype to finished product in a matter of weeks, this can be done, and it can be done by large traditional companies. So the key here is agility. Agility was originally a bottom-up movement. It came from the Agile Manifesto. The top-down implementation, which often followed, was much less fun. We'll say a couple words about that, and maybe about the synthesis, which is about what companies are trying to do these days at the company level. So, I think the use of the word agility goes back to the term, to the Manifesto for Agile Software Development, which was published in 2001. Most people talk about these 4 value pairs. I'm assuming this is an Agile audience, so we'll skip the 4 value pairs, but what most people forget about are that opening sentence and the principles, in particular the first one. So what is this opening sentence about? Well, uncovering better ways is all about learning. Doing it and helping others to do it is all about collaboration. Okay, and finally, we have a clear statement of purpose. Okay, so if we were going to say, what is the Agile mindset all about? It's about 3 things. It's about learning, it's about collaboration, and it's about purpose. And if we look at the Agile methods, most of them, maybe even all of them, have the following 5 elements in common. Okay, so the first is clarity of purpose. Not just what are we doing, but why are we doing it? Okay, and this gives us the basis for much different conversations than just knowing what we're going to do. In personal agility, we call this celebration. Celebrate what you got done. choose what you want to do moving forward, as opposed to review and plan, which is the Scrum terminology or the more traditional project management terminology. It's much more fun to review things that are done. Those are things you can celebrate. When you review stuff that's in progress or that almost but doesn't quite work, those conversations are much less pleasant. Okay, and choice is about making active choices about what we want to do moving forward. And the idea in personal agility is to align your choices with what really matters. And finally, we have cadence. Now, we've heard Scrum talks about cadence in the sense of sprints and things you do every day and things you do every couple of weeks. Kanban also talks about cadence. The last element which has emerged, and I don't think any of the major Agile frameworks had this at the beginning, even though they talked about individuals and interactions, none of them really talked explicitly about dialogue. Okay, dialogue is a communication skill. Dialogue is asking powerful questions and listening to the answers, really listening to the answers. Scrum has been moving in this direction. The latest version of the Scrum Guide now talks about the 3 key questions of sprint planning: why, what, and how. And this is where I think conversations get their energy. This is what makes leadership possible. This is what makes seeing the big picture possible, is dialogue. Okay, so we're going to see more about dialogue as we move forward. Now, what is this fake agility stuff? Well, remember, agility, the agile methods were invented by software developers. They went to their managers and they said, well, you can do whatever you want as long as it doesn't impact my bonus. And the problem is, as a community, we really haven't offered much to senior leadership because, most of our stuff is about groups of people either working, bringing an item through a process in Kanban or creating something as in Scrum, okay? Groups of people producing stuff, doing a task. But as a leader, especially as an executive leader, you're not really part of a team that's producing something. At least that's not how many executives see themselves up till now. You're an individual and you're responsible for a team or you're responsible for an organization. So it's really a completely different world. And all you've been hearing is how it's going to mean a loss of power and a loss of influence. And you're saying, well, why should I even be interested in this? Okay, so notice they weren't exactly wrong. Now, having said that, some companies discovered it. Some companies, their leadership said, let's try to make this work for us. Steve Denning, who was the first management author to really discover agility and related practices and find out what they meant, he identified companies that were actually trying to be agile and said, what do they have in common? And he came up with 3 laws: the law of the network, which is about the flow of information through the company, the law of small teams, which is about collaboration, and the law of the customer, which is about identifying customer needs, not just for existing customers, but especially for new customers. Now, notice how that matches up pretty well with learning, collaboration, and purpose. And in fact, once we get past that, what's the hype about, and talk about what executives want from their organizations, these requests actually map fairly well to one of the 3 laws of agility. Now, I've discovered as I work with executives that most executives are more agile than they think. Okay, and one practice which is very common is what's called a mastermind group, where you bring a group of peers together. They take a problem, they discuss the problem, they analyze the problem, they identify causes, they identify solutions. Okay, and I actually think for an executive, this could be one of the gateways to agility as well. Let's start applying that first value or that first statement of the Agile Manifesto, looking for better ways of doing what we do by doing it and helping each other to do it. So let's come back to the more concrete, how are we going to solve our problems in the organization? And this is the amazing secret. If you're an executive, the software developers in your company have already come up with a solution to your problem. Okay, and let's take a closer look at these challenges. We talk about clarity of purpose, we talk about alignment, we talk about the multitasking problem, being able to take decisions, and being able to hold focus long enough to get results. Well, these basic agile tools, purpose, clarity of purpose, what really matters, celebration, choice, cadence, and dialogue, they give us the tools to solve these problems. Okay, so let's take a closer look at that with the multitasking problem. Okay, because this is I think we saw this with Walter's group before. In fact, let's take a look at Walter's situation. He wanted to change, his company wanted to do something. They were literally unable to do it. Okay, and so what happened is, when they started on this 2-year journey, they were doing all these things at once. 10% of the capacity of their top 10 people felt like a lot, but when you divide it by the 15 or 20 or 30 initiatives that they have going on in parallel, none of them are getting any significant effort. And that slows them down tremendously. Okay, so the problem here is what we call multitasking. And at one level, it's pretty obvious what the problem is. You take your capacity, okay, you've got 100%. Okay, if you're doing 2 things at once, well, each one gets half of your capacity. 3 things, 4 things. By the time you're doing 5 things, each of those things only gets 20% of your capacity. Okay, but there's a second problem. Okay, and the literature usually talks about switching costs. Okay, but hasn't really quite figured out what switching costs are. My belief is when you multitask, you actually add a new task. And that task is deciding which one to do. Okay, and the complexity of that task increased dramatically as you have more and more tasks. So now we quote this in the book. The original research is from Jerry Weinberg. And what he observed is that when you have 2 tasks, 20% of your capacity is getting eaten up by what he called switching costs, and what I believe is choosing which task to work on. So for each additional task that you get, you lose another 20% of your capacity. By the time you're up to 5 tasks in parallel, 3/4 of your capacity is being wasted on deciding what to do next. And imagine all of the meetings to set up a meeting to get the stakeholders involved to take a decision to, oh, no, wait, we got to reflect on that again. You see where the capacity goes. So that 25% divided by the 5 tasks that you actually have to do, well, this is where the completion time just goes through the roof. Okay, and if you want to improve the performance of your organization, try to cut down the multitasking by just 1 task. From 5 to 4, from 4 to 3, you'll probably cut your cycle time in half. Okay, and this is the problem of multitasking. So, and this is why we see, when Walter did this the second time around, whoosh, because they were applying that fundamental concept of cadence, produce tangible results in a short period of time. Okay, for them, that short period of time was about 3 weeks. Notice I say about, they were a bit less focused on having really that exact day, because their first duty was to their customers. But roughly every 3 weeks, plus or minus a couple of days, that's when they got together. They planned goals that they could achieve in those 3 weeks. They always applied pairing. They always did a daily scrum within the pair to kind of get them synced and get them going. And that had a huge impact on their motivation, and it had a huge impact on their results. Okay, and that's why they're in such a happy place now. From Walter's perspective, first thing he did, probably the most important thing he did, was he committed to making this a success, to being part of the solution. They applied agility to the process of improving the company. Usually you apply it to the problem of building a product. They applied it to improving the company. Okay, and they really did this rhythm every 3 weeks. They got together, looked at what they'd accomplished, set concrete goals for the next 3 weeks. And the other thing which he did is he realized, I need to be an example. Okay, and so for him, it was important, end each week with satisfaction, start each week with confidence. This is actually something kind of what I call rules of the road, which is part of how you keep your organization together, by having these concepts that kind of define how we do things. Okay, and this is reshaping your corporate culture. Okay, so how do you apply agility to leadership? Well, the first thing to do is to start with yourself. Okay, now we've heard a lot of talk about agile transformation at the company level. I think there's not enough clarity about what it is that we're doing when we say we want to make an agile transformation. And what we're really doing is we're restructuring the company. So you'll notice restructuring is a management word. That's something that's going to happen fairly high up. You might not be restructuring the whole company. It might only be a part of the company. But to really get the full benefit from it, it's probably, a whole company problem. And what you're trying to do is improve your speed and improve your responsiveness. Okay, that's to deal with the VUCA world. You're also optimizing for value production. You want to spend your time on things that bring value. Now, the personal transformation, I think, precedes the corporate transformation, because if the individuals themselves don't have that agile mindset, there's no way that the company, which depends on the people, will ever do it. So what is a personal transformation? Well, it's about getting new perspectives to enable you to learn faster. And this is what in turn enables more speed and more value production. So how do you do it? Well, I think the place to start is collaboration and learning. Okay, so let's get together at regular intervals, talk about our challenges, look for solutions. The next thing to do, and I actually think this is probably the most alien, the biggest leap of faith for an executive, because this is something that a digital engineer really appreciates. Is the clock that gives the system its rhythm. Okay, and this enables an electronic device to go from a known state to a known state, process that known state, and go into a new known state. Okay, so if you're doing anything digital, ask your engineers why every computer has a clock in it. And this cadence is really about enabling effective decision making. Okay, so in personal agility, we suggest you celebrate and choose, once a week or so. Scrum suggests review and plan in a rhythm from anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks. This is about cadence. This is about defining tangible results, and then reflecting on what you've achieved to decide what you want to do next. Then come together as a team. Okay, this will enable you to focus on what really matters, and by being able to do it for yourself, you learn to ask the right questions to be able to do it for your organization. So with that, I want to say thank you very much. I've put a couple of links up here if you want to get the book, or if you'd like to continue the conversation with me. We got a couple minutes left for questions, I believe. So I'm going to pass the talking stick back to our organizers and say, do we have any questions?
Thanks for your presentations. It was really nice. If any of the participants wants to ask something, you can just unmute yourself.
Okay, it looks to me like we have a few more participants. So than we did at the beginning. So what might be good is if we could share those links again and invite people to participate in the poll. And if we have new data, at the moment we don't have any new data yet, but if we get some more data, then we can share that as well.
I have shared your link.
Okay, excellent. Yep.
I would also like to ask you a question.
Sure.
I was also a product manager for some time, and I've had one problem. Some team members didn't want to spend time sprint planning, reviewing, retrospectives. They were arguing that it's a waste of time. And what would be your argument to that?
Well, the first thing, remember I said, listen before you talk, ask before you tell. The first thing that I would do is I would ask, okay, well, why is it a waste of time? Why do you think it's a waste of time? Okay, and listen to, really listen to their concerns. Okay, and one of the approaches that we recommend is a pattern that's used in air traffic control. Okay, so the airplane is on the runway. We'll call up Kiev Tower, Air France flight, whatever, en route, request permission to depart for Paris. Okay, and the tower will come back. Air France flight, whatever, line up on runway 28, climb to clear for takeoff, climb to 7,000 feet, contact departure control. Okay, and then the tower will read that back. The airplane will read that back. Air France flight, whatever, line up runway 28, after departure, climb 7,000, call you at 7,000, ready for takeoff. Air France, whatever, read back correct. Clear for takeoff. Okay, and only then are they allowed to take off. Okay, so notice they give the instruction, they validate the instruction, and that, you know, in air traffic control, they do it for safety reasons. But when we do it together, that's actually building trust. That's confirming to the other person that they've been heard. And it's when they've been heard, that when they feel heard, that's when they'll be willing to listen to you. Okay, so, you know, so in the case of the people who are kind of struggling with, struggling with the value of these events, you know, I'd have a conversation. First of all, really try to understand what their concerns are. You know, at that point, they'll be willing to listen to you about why you want to do them or why you feel it's important to do them. And then you can have and hopefully you can get some agreement that they see, oh yeah, you know, it's important for us to know what to build, and it's important for us to, you know, whatever your reasons are. Okay, let's have a conversation about how to best achieve these goals. Okay, and now you're no longer having, you know, you're not having a fundamental discussion of principles. You're having a conversation about what's the best way to solve a problem that you both agreed on. Okay, and that's an approach that I employ for building alignment, and I found it works in a lot of different contexts. So that would be my suggestion for this situation. You know, listen, build agreement about what the problem is, build agreement about what a good solution is, have a conversation about how to best achieve that goal.
Okay, thanks a lot for your advice. I will definitely use it in the future.
Okay, and I want to hear how it plays out.
Okay. Oh, does anyone want to ask a questions?
So I see the next speaker is on, you know, Jim Hannon. I'll say, you know, Jim, I'm going to ask Jim if he has a question, and you know, if he doesn't have a question, I'll be sure to come back with a good one for him after his talk.
I find it I'm very privileged to follow Peter. Just so folks know, I'm actually a personal agility aficionado. I follow this, and I tell people this is the piece that's missing. This is the piece that's missing from regular agility. We've all done this. We've all seen the issues. The problem is that the people in the executive positions are not agile. And how do you make them agile? Personal agility. I've taught this course to people at the company I work with, and all of a sudden I kept getting, yeah, oh, yeah. So kudos to Peter for spearheading this, and I strongly suggest you read the book. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Jim. So, Alexander, I'm going to say thank you to you.
Thank you, Peter.